Random clickbait.
Trial by Ordeal, an introduction.
Written and directed by John Landis Davis.
The Code of Babylonian King of Justice, Hammurabi, 1754 BC, second law states, a person accused of witchcraft by another who cannot prove the claim must jump into the river. If the river overcomes them, the one making the complaint takes possession of the accused's house. If the river does not, the one making the accusation is put to death, and the vindicated accused takes possession of the accuser's home.
A form of divine arbitration, the ordeal of the river in Babylonian disputes served to resolve issues that are difficult to prove, such as accusations of witchcraft, and in the case of Bronze Age Amorites, to validate the truth of statements of foreigners, slaves, children and women.
Relationship with John, have you had any sexual physical contact with any other males besides him? She answered no. She did not tell the truth.
Contemporary courts of law attempt to establish the facts of an incident in question, and if the duty or act of those involved gives rise to civil or criminal liability on the part of the parties, and what the law demands the court to do as a result of this liability. In contrast, the legal ritual of the ordeal is meant to restore balance to the community and address grievances of its members. Hyams, 1981.
The truth revealed by God in the ordeal does not concern any specific fact.
Was absolutely fucking John, with even the police going so far as to say, yes, we believe it was 100% John, but we just don't.
Rather, the deity pronounces judgment on the souls of those involved and whether their claims are pure and just. God's revealed decision does not validate or falsify the statements in particular, and instead affirms or denies the social status of the accused and accuser. Brown, 1975.
In the 6th century, Catholic bishop Gregory of Tours wrote of his support of trial by ordeal, and the belief God's imminent justice would consistently manifest and protect the innocent. The bishop recounts a dispute over correct doctrine between a Catholic deacon and heretical priest that was brought before God's judgment in the ordeal of hot water. A cauldron filled with water and was brought to a boil and a ring dropped in. Each was tasked with plucking the ring out, and the injury or lack thereof confirmed the holder of correct doctrine. Not wanting to risk defeat, the deacon had applied a balm on his hand, an arm that would protect against injury and ensure victory. Discovered, a substitute stranger volunteered to partake in the deacon's place.
The man replacing the deacon was named Hyacinth, went first, and boldly stuck his hand into the cauldron of boiling water. Unaffected by the water, Hyacinth leisurely poked around the cauldron and commented to the onlookers that water was cool, despite its boiling appearance. After retrieving the ring unscathed, the heretic priest went next with radically different results. The priest unable to grab the ring, he pulled out his arm. It emerged severely damaged and was shown to be without skin from his hand to his elbow. A graphic and violent proof of his unsound doctrine and beliefs. Kadri, 2005.
Ordeals are rituals. Rituals are, quote, a mode of symbolic discourse with reference to mystical beings or powers and evoke those sentiments from which a society is structured, and, quote, Lincoln, 1989. Bruce Wells, 2008, writes the three forms of judicial divination used historically are the ordeal, oath, and oracle. An oath performed by a community member of good standing was considered dispositive and resolved the case in the favor of the oathmaker. God or the gods were thought to ensure the truth of the statements, or if false, punish the dishonest then or at a later date.
The judicial use of oracles sought a verdict from the deity through the use of cultic instruments and rituals. For example, in the Hebrew scriptures, the casting of lots was used as a means to seek the approval or judgment of Yahweh.
Radding, 1979, wrote the worldview of the 11th century people, whose community performed ordeals, saw God's justice as imminent and present in the mundane. Quote, ordinary misfortunes, drought, disease, the rapacity of one's neighbors, took on the character of divine judgment of a person's moral worth, end quote.
A trivial and chance happening could at any moment become transformed into a supernatural event and become a moment of deep importance, filled with spiritual revelations and God's judgment.
Medical doctor Robert Christison, 1855, documented the ordeal of poison performed by the tribal people of the African Gambia River. The bark of a leguminous tree is ground into a powder and added to water, and is given to those suspected of witchcraft. In a similar ordeal, the people of Sierra Leone used tree bark to create red water which the accused must drink before the village. Women attend the ordeal dressed in their finest clothes and look on with earnest interest as the ritual is performed and the red water is made by mixing the powdered tree bark with water. The mixture becomes frothy and is drank quickly in 8-ounce doses, and will often prove lethal after the 4th dose of red water. Guilt is determined if they are overcome with intense stomach pains but do not vomit. If they survive, they will be sold as slaves. If, however, they vomit and suffer no other injury, they are deemed innocent.
The ordeal of the bean is done by the tribes of Calabar when an unexpected death is attributed to witchcraft. A near certainty in a worldview that lacks any notion of viruses, heart attacks, or other natural and medical-based causes of death. To prove their innocence, those close to the deceased are made to ingest the Calabar nut and survive. This can only be achieved by quickly vomiting up the poison, an act which at once confirms their innocence, but also saves them from the death induced by the Calabar nut.
Duke Ephraim, a prominent chief, died unexpectedly in 1834.
50 relatives and slaves were forced to suffer the ordeal of the Calabar nut. The ordeal left 40 of the 50 dead and was considered just by those who partook. Both by the remaining living innocent and the discovered guilty, who failed the ordeal and died.
The Sota, ordeal of bitter water, is found in the Torah. In the book of Numbers, chapter 3, Moses is told by God how to perform the ritual.
Therefore I will send thee, Moses, Egypt. Who am I, Lord, that you should send me? What words can I speak that they will heed? I will teach thee what thou wilt say.
It requires a woman thought to be unfaithful by her husband to go with him to the temple and make an oath before God and the priest. She is innocent of the sin/crime of adultery.
In the case of 3-year-old Carlito, Rayshawn, you are not.
After the woman makes her oath of innocence, the priest takes dust from the tabernacle floor and mixes it with water, and is given to the woman to drink. If she lies, the bitter water will cause her to become barren.
You slept with my best friend?
Yes, I was thinking about you the whole time.
A threat that might motivate the guilty to confess rather than risk the loss of her fertility. One of the few things outside beauty that gave women value in the cultures of the distant past. If honest and innocent, the bitter water will have no effect, and the accused woman will leave the temple with her reassured husband, unharmed.
Trial by combat, also known as the wager of battle, is a bilateral ordeal, meaning there are two parties performing the ordeal and invoking God's judgment, as opposed to the previous unilateral ordeals where a single individual is on trial. Originating with Germanic tribes, the judicial duel was to the death, with any surviving guilty party executed. Doherty, 2020. Before the battle, each combatant made a solemn oath the results of the duel were legally binding. Common people wore no heavy armor, and instead, worn suits of leather which had grease to discourage wrestling.
Nobles fought on horseback, and often began as a joust, with each rushing toward the other with their lances outstretched. If both survived the lance charge, combatants could dismount and fight on equal ground. They were not required to do so, and could remain on their horse and fight a man standing on the ground, without penalty. Men could fight women in duels, and there exists images within texts of legal theorists of the Middle Ages, showing possible forms these could take that ensured a just contest. Men could be put in waist-high holes and forced to fight women who now towered over them. This artificial height advantage was supplemented with their ability to move about the match space unencumbered, unlike their male opponents, who must remain within the hole's narrow geometry.
Ways of telling whether she is a witch.
Oh, what are they? Tell us!
Tell me.
The beliefs underlying the swimming of a witch and other post-Christian ordeals of cold water is the faith the holy instrument of baptism would refuse those tainted by witchcraft and crime. This rejection manifested with the water's desire to expel those unholy by causing them to float.
Outwardly and formally similar to the ordeal of the river demanded by King of Justice Hammurabi 1754 BC. The ordeal of cold water performed by witch hunters and magistrates of the early and late Middle Ages were based on different judicial and theological beliefs.
Rather than the laws and procedures of Hammurabi guiding the process of adjudication, the Christian Bible and the Witch Hunter Handbook Malleus Maleficarum, of 1486, aided and outlined the best practices of witch discovery and disposal.
Witches apprehended, examined, and executed. A 1613 pamphlet details the trial and execution of the Bedford witches, Mother Sutton and her unnamed daughter. The two were seized and taken to a nearby mill and thrown in its small body of water. Immersed waist-deep and tied to ropes, in case their innocence caused the water to accept them, and onlookers might need to quickly pull them out, the pair failed this initial ordeal and were removed and examined for marks of sorcery.
None found the two were subjected once more to the ordeal of cold water, but in the second attempt they were bound in the traditional manner where the left thumb would be tied to the right toe and left toe to the right thumb. The water again rejected them and they were executed soon after.
The use of ordeals was not without criticism. The 13th century Bishop of Vladimir, Serapion, is quoted, "You make the witness and say, if she begins to sink she is innocent, if she floats she is a witch." Is it possible the devil himself, seeing your weak faith, supported her so she would not sink, thus contributing to your own perdition? 4. You prefer the testimony of inanimate objects to that of a created human being.
The Magna Carta Libertatum, 1215. An agreement between King John and English nobles established the right to jury trial. Accused could not be made to perform an ordeal unless the accuser had the sufficient and necessary number of oaths that established prima facie proof of guilt. Pope Innocent III convoked the Fourth Lateran Council in 1213.
Among the reforms aimed at the questionable behavior of priests was the prohibition of their further participation in judicial ordeals,
thus robbing the judicial processes ordeals of theological and sociological legitimacy. This, and turn towards secular forms of adjudication, began the end of ordeals in the West as an acceptable means of dispensing and ensuring justice.